O.J. Simpson is back in the news with the Vegas incident, but is he getting a raw deal or long overdue justice? Today we'll talk to two attorneys, a psychologist and a media expert to get their opinions on the case. First up, Anthony Salerno, a leading criminal defense attorney here in Southern California, and LeeAundra Temescu, a communications media expert. Great to have you here today, Tony, LeeAundra. So Tony, pleasure. Tony, I know that you have some strong feelings about this. You think O.J. is getting a raw deal?
I think he's getting a raw deal, and you see this over and over again with prosecutors throughout the country. You saw it in the Duke lacrosse case. You saw it in the Michael Jackson prosecution up in Santa Barbara County. You have prosecutors who are trying to make their name on the back of a celebrity. They can have this, their proverbial notch in the belt. And realistically, this isn't a really horrible case in terms of it's not a violent case. No one was hurt. O.J. Simpson wasn't personally armed. And
so they're going after him because he's O.J. Simpson?
I think that's a big part of it, because if you're the DA and it was a Clark County, Nevada, and you get the O.J. conviction when we couldn't here in L.A., you're probably going to be elected for life if you want.
Get the book deal, be on the talk show circuit.
I mean, you hate to think that way. They're supposed to be public servants. They're supposed to be, prosecutors. They have a tremendous power, but heck, the prosecutor in North Carolina was disbarred over unethical tactics. So it happens. And the other thing I see there is that they're cutting deals left and right to the co-defendants, and they're at least as culpable as O.J. Simpson, if not more so.
They've cut deals with what, 3 of the co-defendants at this point?
I believe it's a 3. It might even be 4, but it's at least 3. And getting their charges knocked way down, and the only reason to do that is so you can get O.J. And if they were allocating the blame fairly, those guys wouldn't be getting those kind of deals.
What would happen to a regular person if they had done something similar?
Well, it's arguably an armed robbery, because they did go in there demanding things back, and some of them were armed. So they probably would be prosecuted. But would they be cutting deals left and right with the other people? I wouldn't think so. I did a murder trial a few years ago in Riverside County. It wasn't terribly dissimilar. It was an armed robbery. The client I had was a supposed aider and abetter. In other words, he wasn't the one with the gun, like O.J. He was just there, and it happened. And there was no deal being cut to him. They went after him for first-degree murder, life without the possibility of parole. And they could have easily, had it been, say, like an O.J. case, they could have easily offered him a deal to testify against the other fella. As it turns out, the other fellow was convicted. My guy was acquitted. But they weren't offering any special deals to him. They were just going for everybody. I mean, you have a case like O.J. They were all in the room. They all appeared to be equally involved in it. Why cut deals to guys who you could probably get a conviction of? I think the answer to your question is, if it wasn't O.J., the Clark County DA in Nevada would probably just have gone after everybody, and they wouldn't have been cutting any deals. They wouldn't have needed to.
At this point, he's facing what? I mean, everything from kidnapping charges to...
Yeah, he's got kidnapping, robbery, armed robbery. I think those are the main charges, but of course there's a couple of counts because there's multiple victims. So
and could face how much jail time if?
I believe that kidnapping for purposes of committing a crime like that, I think in California carries the possibility of a life, that's a life case, and I suspect it probably is in Nevada too.
So if you're one of those people who think that he got away with something in the past, he could actually face more jail time than he did for the murder trial.
I mean, even if he gets a light sentence on this, he's going to be getting a lot of time in the Nevada State Prison.
Well, LeeAundra, there's the courtroom jury and court opinion, and then there's the court of public opinion. Right. How's that looking?
Well, I'm just pleased from a personal point of view to hear Anthony's remarks, because they're so different from the image that I'm getting. I study the media, and all I know of this case is what I have heard in the media. And if you look at the media coverage, as it has so many times in the past, it's already convicted him.
Right.
And I think public opinion wants to convict him so badly. This is really a case of the postman always rings twice. And that's how people are looking at this. They're like, okay, if we can't get Al Capone for being a mobster, we're going to get him for tax evasion.
Right. Everybody's saying, like, here's our chance, or, this time we're going to get the guy.
Right. And that's certainly the tenor of the media coverage, most definitely, yeah.
Anthony, do you think they will get him this time?
It's going to be very tough to get an acquittal, because of what LeeAundra just said, that the Court of Public Opinions hung O.J. Simpson a long time ago, and richly deserved. He has done nothing in the years since he was acquitted of the murder to cause anyone to have any sympathy for him. And plus, it's such a notorious case and such a notorious person that it's going to ever be impossible really to find any juror that, unless they were living under a rock, that that isn't familiar and doesn't have some type of an opinion about O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, so what's jury selection going to be like this time? Because obviously people feel that, that played a major role in the murder case. Sure. What kind of people are they going to be looking for, and can they find them, I guess, as you said with...
I think, the same types of jurors that most criminal lawyers would tell you you'd want in any case, generally speaking. And I think there are two kinds. I mean, this case is a little unique because O.J. Simpson is someone who's known, and although the vast majority of people definitely have a negative opinion of him, there are definitely, I think, some who might not necessarily have a negative opinion. And I think that probably, from what I understand, sort of is broken down on racial lines. I think O.J. Simpson is still seen as symbolic of sort of a victory for oppressed minorities in the wake of the Rodney King police beating, which led to the riots, which I think in large part led to the acquittal of O.J. Simpson, if you go back and look at it historically. But the main factor, I think, if you're a lawyer, you're looking for jurors who are idealistic, who take the oath that they are under very seriously, an oath to follow the law, to follow the facts as it's presented to them, and to not go in with any kind of an agenda. People who take the oath real seriously and really want they're process-oriented. And they're bright enough to understand the distinction between what maybe they might feel in their gut versus what the evidence and the law are leading them to. And that's a hard kind of a juror to find, but that would be generally what you'd be looking for.
And is it possible, I read some comments you wrote earlier that, that when you have people who are making, well, I don't want to say sweetheart deals, but cutting deals with the prosecutors, how do the jurors react to that? Do they look at them as less reliable? Are there jury instructions to that effect that, like, look, this person got a deal? And
exactly right. There actually are jury instructions, and I don't know about Nevada, I assume they're so, but in California definitely, that specifically direct the jurors to take the witness, the testimony of sort of co-conspirators, essentially with a grain of salt. I think the words in the California instructions are to look on them with doubt or something like that. I forget the exact language, but that's written right into the jury instructions, which is very powerful. And I think it's just sort of human nature too. When you look at someone who's explicitly given a deal, it's common sense to think that they have a motivation to get to save their own skin.
But that's pretty much what they're relying on, though, right? Then in that case is the testimony of co-conspirators, which is supposed to be taken with a grain of salt.
Right, exactly. And that, and then there's some victims, supposed victims, but they're all pretty shady in their own right with criminal histories and things. And if you believe O.J. Simpson, they were at least in some way responsible for things that were stolen out of his house. So they're, fencing stolen property in essence. So they're not like sympathetic victims in any way.
Is the audio tape going to be admitted?
I would think so, for sure. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, first of all, it's to the extent it has O.J. Simpson's own voice on it. It's hearsay, but it's the first exception to the hearsay rule is the words of the defendant, and then also it's well, technically it definitely comes in. It's not a an evidence class, but yeah, it will come in for sure. And that's a good piece of evidence for the prosecution because it's. Basically it kind of shows that O.J. Simpson was apparently somewhat well aware of what was happening in the room. I don't believe he made any reference to guns that he knew they were coming out, but the fact that he didn't say anything about, like, you would expect that if the guns came out and it was a surprise to him, he may have said something like, "Oh my God, what's up with the guns?" Yeah, where'd you
put those away? Or...
Right, but he didn't, and he seemed to be, from the sounds of it, sort of orchestrating it. Like, I think the words something to the effect of, "You're not going anywhere. Stay right there," something to that effect. So
yeah.
Kind of also
a few other words
like
thrown in there, I think. But
ringleader.
We'll be right back. And we are back today discussing the O.J. Simpson Vegas incident and case with criminal defense attorney Anthony Salerno. And joining me now is Dr. Sheila Forman, a psychologist and attorney. Great to have you here today, Dr. Forman.
Greg. It's a pleasure to be here.
So everybody's saying, here we go again.
Mm-hmm. Here we go again.
And what do you think of that as a psychologist?
I think here we do go again. I think that
Okay.
O.J. Simpson has a need to be in the public eye. And so he finds ways to do that, whether it's through the publication of his book or through engaging in behavior that's questionable. Somehow, some way, psychologically speaking, he needs to be in the limelight. And so here we go again.
Well, when we were talking earlier and you said, I think even beyond, let's say, the quest for fame or being in the limelight, you said that there's maybe a psychological motivation that that he may feel guilty about something, and that he is. You want to explain what you told me earlier?
Yeah, certainly. I'd be happy to. Sometimes when we do something that doesn't sit right with us, our guilt plagues us. And eventually that guilt wins out. And oftentimes what we do is we end up acting out our guilt in a way that draws attention to ourselves with the unconscious desire that we actually get caught. That somebody finds out.
So you want to get caught.
We want to get caught. Somehow, some way we want to get caught. And this is unconscious. This isn't deliberate. If it was deliberate, we'd go into a police station and confess. This is unconscious. So when I first heard about the robbery in Las Vegas with O.J. Simpson, that was the first thing I thought of. That this is his unconscious way of drawing more negative attention to himself so that he can get caught and finally be brought to justice.
So he wants to get caught. And of course, there was the book title, which I guess he says he didn't come up with, but If I Did It.
If I Did It.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty telling book title from a psychological point of view.
Maybe you could just get rid of the if. I don't know.
Isn't that what Ron Goldman's father did when he bought the rights to it, right? And he published it. And he said, the way I did it, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was changing the title to make it more guilt suggestive.
Well, and so, one thing about we were talking beforehand about the criminal case, and the one thing that I always thought was very telling was that he did not take the witness stand in his own defense. Curious what you both think about that.
Would you like to start?
Sure. Well, that question is one of the big sort of things that the criminal defense lawyers always worry about when they're doing a trial. It's sort of like the proverbial, the 800-pound gorilla in the corner. There's a jury instruction that says, as a jury, you're not supposed to take into account the fact that the defendant didn't testify. However, as the defense lawyer, you have the absolute right to choose whether it should be given or not. And it's always this quandary, do I say it, and then hopefully that the jurors will rely on it and do fulfill their oath to rely on that, or am I better off just not mentioning it all for fear of drawing unnecessary attention?
But as a defense attorney, there's a reason you're not putting the client on the stand? When do you put him on the stand, and when don't you put him on the stand?
I think most criminal defense lawyers tend to be very cautious, and they tend to be, they really want to be able to control everything that happens as much as they can. And when you put the defendant on, naturally, it becomes the main focus of most trials if you choose to do it. And because they're getting cross-examined, and there's substantial amount of things to ask them questions about, I think lawyers tend to be afraid to put the client in the stand. My personal view, I'm probably unusual that way. I like to put the client in the stand if I can because of what you said. The jurors, whether they're instructed not to consider it or not, they're going to, in some way, shape, or form, it's going to make a big impact on their thinking. And if the client does testify and testifies somewhat well, then it's very good. Does
it matter to you whether you think the client is innocent or guilty?
Everybody asks me that. Even lawyers ask me that. And the short answer is no, in the sense that I think what any good lawyer would concern themselves with is what the evidence is going to show, what I have to deal with in terms of what the prosecution has as evidence. And there is an ethical obligation as a lawyer, believe it or not to in fact, I just gave a lecture on legal ethics yesterday where this was one of the issues, that you're not supposed to basically perpetrate falsehoods on the court, including a jury. But
but sometimes you're representing somebody who's guilty, so.
Well, yeah, but you can't put false evidence on. But short of that, it's often not all that clear cut. And the truth of the matter is, most of the clients, at least the ones that end up going to trial, usually tell me that they're not guilty.
Of course.
And I'm not in a position to really question it, but.
Dr. Forman, what does that say to you if the defendant is on the stand or isn't?
Well, as a lawyer, I understand the legal strategy. You're building a case and you make a determination whether the defendant taking the stand is going to help or hinder your case. But from a psychological standpoint, you have to take into account the effect of him not taking the stand on the juror, which is what you said. And most people don't take very well to that. They think if the person's innocent, let him tell his story. And if he's keeping quiet, it suggests that there's guilt. And that may not be the truth, but as human beings, we tend to lean in that direction.
It implies it. Well, I've often said, as I told you the other night, I said, if I were wrongly accused of murder, I don't think my attorney could shut me up because I'd be out there saying, look, I was here and I was doing this. And I mean, if you're being wrongly accused of murder is not something I would take lightly, and I wouldn't go down easily.
Right. But you'd also want to listen to your attorney to
right.
put your best case forward. And so, but I can appreciate the wanting to be heard, which is a human need. And so when somebody doesn't take that opportunity to be heard, it raises questions.
Will he be on the stand this time around?
Good question. The short answer is I don't know. I think a lot depends on who his lawyer is and how comfortable the lawyer feels about it. If I had to guess, I'd probably say no, because more often than not, that's generally what happens. And he didn't do a particularly good job, the consensus is, in a civil trial where he didn't have the right to refuse to testify. And that's probably about as good of an indicator as you might get as to how well he'd do. Of course, that case was a little different because the evidence was more compelling. But in some ways, it was actually easier for him to testify in the civil murder trial because there was never any direct, controvertible evidence that he committed the crime. I mean, he could have just said, I didn't do it, I wasn't there. You might have this, you might have that. I wasn't there. But this case is different. He was there, something happened, and his explanation is going to be that much more difficult to make. And I don't know. I'd have to think about it. But it always boils down to the same question. Was it going to help or is it going to hurt? Right. And I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
Do you think there could be any sympathy for him from the jury for the fact that, I mean, I think initially a lot of us, when some of us heard the charges, the long list of charges going against him, we kind of thought, as you said, not that I believe in, breaking into hotel rooms with guns and that sort of thing, but yet some people thought maybe were the charges excessive for this kind of a case? And is there sympathy out there for OJ, or could there be because of that people think that, well, maybe he did that, but look, I mean, this is kind of overkill for this situation?
I have a better answer to that when I know what, if any, sort of deal is being offered to him. If the prosecution's going for the full Monty, as far as the maximum sentence that they could get under the law or something close to it, then it looks like it's unfair. Because if you take out this idea that he maybe murdered 2 people in the past and just look at the case on its merits, it's really not that bad. I mean, it was his stuff, apparently. It was stolen from his house. He was trying to get it back. No one was hurt. There's a suggestion he was trying to do the book deal after the fact, and or the interview. So
a TV show. Well, now it came out that the FBI was
that they knew about it ahead of
and
time. And it seems to me, I mean, if you were intending to talk about it after the fact, that must suggest that you didn't go into it thinking you were going to commit a crime, because obviously you weren't going to be talking about committing a crime. If you do, you were going to commit a crime. But I have a feeling the prosecution's there's not going to be any deal, no reasonable deal, and I would think that it is excessive. As far as sympathy goes, I don't think there's going to be any sympathy unless it's the kind of people that I mentioned before who would already be inclined to see him sort of as a martyr.
If they can get the jury from the first trial.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be right back. And we are back discussing the O.J. Simpson case with Dr. Sheila Forman and LeeAundra Temescu. Well, Dr. Forman, what are your thoughts on just the public reaction to the case so far? Well, let me put it this way. He has said that, Simpson has said that he was set up, that, he didn't see it coming, but now it came out this morning, that the FBI may have been alerted beforehand and he had plans for the interview. So can you claim you were set up if you were planning to do a TV show about it afterward, or an interview, or whatever he was doing? Because initially some people said when they heard that he was audio taped, they said, okay, well look, somebody was up to something. But now it comes out that he actually had the media conference planned. So
I think most of the public is rolling their eyes at this. And to follow what we were talking about a little bit earlier about sympathy, I don't think there's much sympathy for O.J. Simpson out there. I really don't. I think people are tired of his shenanigans and probably would like to see some justice. And most people are probably rooting for the prosecution in this case as well.
LeeAundra, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this report that came out this morning about him wanting to organize a media conference, the whole thing has just been surreal. I loved what you said about him wanting this very negative attention, because he is now manipulating the media, or trying to manipulate the media. If you look at his mugshot, he's smiling. I mean,
really?
Who smiles in a mugshot?
Wow.
He's smiling in the mugshot. He was hoping to get television interviews after the fact. I mean, this man who is the absolute epitome of media sensationalism and the celebrity trial is now trying to almost turn the tables on the media and start using the media for his own purposes. And of course, he's not doing a very good job at it. And we all see that this is very clumsy. And I mean, if you say there's some sympathy for O.J., I personally feel a little bit of sympathy because he just comes off as such a pathetic figure. His need for media attention is it's so desperate. It's so desperate.
So what do you think about the fact, we've talked before about celebrity apologies and that sort of thing.
Right, yeah.
If he were going to do this and got himself into the mess, what should he have done? How should he have handled it? the aftermath, the
Yeah,
spiraling out of control at the moment.
That's such a hard one. Anthony and I were talking in the green room, and oftentimes what I would counsel a client to do in a situation is the exact opposite of what a lawyer would counsel them to do. Americans want their celebrities who have done wrong to get on their knees and grovel for forgiveness. And of course, a lawyer would say, "Oh, please, no, you can't admit guilt. You can't admit guilt."
I can vouch for that, right? An attorney would say, "No, no, no."
Exactly. So, it would be very difficult for me to counsel him. I mean, quite frankly, I think the guy needs to be on the couch. Obviously, we have some real deep issues here, and the media. It's interesting. The media coverage isn't as excessive, of course, as it was before, because we've got Lindsay and we've got Brittany and we've got Paris, and
right.
we have everyone in jail these days. So OJ's got to share the spotlight with all of those people, and I'm not sure how that's sitting with him, but it's an interesting evolution of media and celebrity trials.
Yeah, and just the fact that he apparently had the press conference, planned. I'm just wondering, well, what do you think of his mental state at the moment? I mean, because the reason
It concerns me greatly, Greg, and I do have room on my couch for him if he needs the help. This man is in serious psychological trouble. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, because the point there is just that, he said something like, I know I'm O.J. Simpson, or what would I be thinking if I did something like this? But I just want to think, what was he thinking when he did this?
That's a great question. I would love to sit down and really ask him that question and try to figure it out. I haven't had the privilege or the pleasure or the whatever you want to call it to sit down and actually evaluate and assess him. But from what I've seen and from what I've read, he knew exactly what he was doing and why he was doing it. And when we look to mental state at the time an offense was committed, we're really asking the question, what were the person's thoughts and behaviors before, during, and after the crime? To be really able to assess whether they were acting from their own free will and if they had an intention to do harm of some sort to someone. And from everything that I know about O.J. Simpson, the answer seems to be he knew exactly what he was doing, why he was doing it, and he can't claim any mental distress or an absent state of mind to get himself off of this one.
Do you have any problem with the fact that the prosecution, the media, the public may be going after him just because he is O.J. Simpson?
Do I personally have a problem, or sitting here as a lawyer and a psychologist? Because personally, I don't have a problem with it at all. As a lawyer, I have lots of problems with it if I were his attorney. As a psychologist, it makes sense to me. We look at the public, we are a society, we have certain values that we want reflected in our celebrities, and when they don't reflect that, we want something from them. And what you were saying about wanting the public apology, that's something we really need. If he sat down and said, I did something wrong, or I did something bad, or I was just trying to get my property back, he might elicit some sympathy from me and other people watching.
Just historically, whenever you look at the media circus that surrounded celebrity trials, and the O.J. Simpson trial was by no means the first. I mean, the trial of the century actually first took place in 1908 with Stanford White, and we've had about 10 of them since then. But I have noted in studying the history of these trials that whenever there is mass media hysteria, there is oftentimes miscarriages of justice. The Lindbergh baby kidnapping, Bruno Hauptmann, very circumstantial evidence. He was found guilty. He was electrocuted. So the historian in me does look at this and is a bit concerned. But when I take that lens off and I just look at it, the media coverage clearly indicates to me that he's going to do some time.
Thank you both for being here today. LeeAundra Temescu, Dr. Sheila Forman.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.